I never thought a single day without my phone would destroy my entire life. But as I stand here on the courthouse steps, divorce papers in my trembling hands, I realize that my digital detox was the beginning of the end. My name is Zadie Corvin, and I'm 34 years old. I worked as a pharmaceutical supply coordinator, managing inventory and vendor relationships. It was a good job, steady income, decent benefits. I thought I had everything figured out. The morning it all started, I was getting ready for what I told my husband Simon would be a spa day. A complete digital detox, I explained, standing in our kitchen while he made coffee for both of us. "I need this, Simon," I said, watching him pour the steaming liquid into my favorite mug. "I'm so stressed with work, and you know how Maya's been acting up. I just need one day to myself, completely disconnected from everything." Simon looked at me with those steady grey eyes of his. At 36, he still had the same methodical way of processing information that made him so good at his job as a crime scene cleaner. People don't realize how much forensic knowledge you need for that work. Documenting evidence, understanding contamination, knowing how to preserve details that might matter later. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice neutral. "That new place downtown, Serenity Springs. They have a strict no-phone policy. Really helps you disconnect, you know?" The lie came so easily. I'd been practicing it for weeks. Simon nodded slowly. "Sounds expensive." "I deserve this," I said, and I meant it. After everything I do for this family, I think I've earned one day of self-care. Our 7-year-old daughter Maya bounced into the kitchen, her dark curls still messy from sleep. "Mummy, can I come to the spa?" "Not this time, sweetheart. Mummy needs some grown-up time." I kissed the top of her head, inhaling that sweet kid smell of shampoo and dreams. Simon was already packing her lunch, moving with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. Sometimes I wondered if that's where we went wrong. He was always so controlled, so emotionally distant. A woman needs passion, needs to feel desired and appreciated. That's how it started with Mick. Michael Halverson was my direct supervisor at the pharmaceutical company, 41 years old with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of confidence that comes from real authority. He understood the pressures I was under, the way Simon's emotional unavailability left me feeling invisible in my own marriage. "You look beautiful today, Zadie," Mick had said just yesterday, his hand briefly touching my shoulder as he reviewed my inventory reports. "That color really brings out your eyes." When was the last time Simon had said anything like that? I couldn't remember. So yes, I was meeting Mick today, not at some spa, but at the downtown hotel bar where we'd been meeting for the past 6 months. It wasn't sordid or cheap. It was sophisticated, mature. Two adults finding connection and understanding that we weren't getting at home. I left my phone on the kitchen counter, making a show of powering it down. "There," I announced. "Complete digital detox. I'll be back around 8 tonight, totally refreshed." Simon was helping Maya with her cereal, but I caught him glancing at my wrist where my fitness watch still sat. I'd forgotten about that, but it didn't matter. The watch only tracked my steps and heart rate, nothing Simon would think to check. "Have a good day," he said quietly. I kissed Maya goodbye and headed for my car, already feeling lighter, free. Today would be perfect. The drive downtown took 20 minutes, and I spent the whole time thinking about how good it would feel to be with someone who actually saw me, who appreciated me. Mick always made me feel like the most interesting woman in the room. I parked in the hotel garage and took the elevator up to the rooftop lounge. The view was spectacular, the whole city spread out below us, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Mick was already there, sitting in our usual corner booth, looking handsome in his navy suit. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. His cologne was expensive, sophisticated. Nothing like Simon's practical deodorant and soap. We ordered our usual, champagne cocktails that cost more than Simon and I typically spent on dinner. But I deserved this. I deserved to feel special. to feel wanted. "How's the home front?" Mick asked, his fingers finding mine across the table. "Same as always. Simon's buried in work. Maya's going through some phase. I feel like I'm managing everything alone." I squeezed his hand. "But let's not talk about that. Today is about us." Mick smiled, that crooked grin that made my heart race. "I got us a room," he said quietly, sliding a keycard across the table. "Nothing fancy, just somewhere we can have some privacy." I felt a thrill run through me. This was what I needed, to feel alive again, to remember what passion felt like. What I didn't know was that 20 feet away, behind the glass partition that separated the lounge from the observation deck, Simon was standing with his phone, photographing everything. I should have paid more attention to Simon's background. Crime scene cleaners don't just mop up messes. They understand evidence. They know how to document things properly, how to preserve details that might matter later. But I was too caught up in the moment to think about any of that. Mick and I spent 2 hours in that hotel room, and it was everything I'd been missing at home. Passion, connection, the feeling of being truly desired. When we finally came back down to the bar, I felt like a completely different person. "I should probably head home soon," I said, checking Mick's watch since I'd left my phone at home. "Simon will start wondering where I am." "One more drink," Mick suggested. "We don't get to do this very often." He was right. Between work schedules and family obligations, our meetings were precious and rare. I agreed to one more champagne cocktail, and we sat close together in the booth, his hand resting on my thigh, talking about everything and nothing. "I wish we could do this every day," I murmured, leaning into him. "Someday," he said, but there was something in his voice that I should have paid attention to. A hesitation, maybe, but I was too happy to analyze it. When we finally left, Mick walked me to the parking garage. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Absolutely." I kissed him goodbye, not caring who might see. I felt invincible. The drive home was blissful. I had the windows down, music playing, feeling more alive than I had in months. Simon would never suspect anything. He was too wrapped up in his own world to pay attention to mine. I pulled into our driveway just after 8, exactly when I'd said I'd be home. Perfect timing. But when I tried to open the front door, my key didn't work. I tried again, thinking maybe the lock was just sticky. Nothing. I checked my keychain to make sure I had the right key. Of course I did. I'd lived here for 8 years. That's when I saw the note taped to the door. "Keys and phone through council. You're served." My blood turned to ice. Before I could process what was happening, a man stepped out from behind our porch pillar. He was holding an official-looking envelope. "Zadie Corvin?" "Yes?" "You've been served." He handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing on my own front porch, locked out of my own home. With shaking hands, I tore open the envelope. Divorce petition. Temporary restraining order. Something about emergency custody modifications. The papers were thorough, detailed, and devastating. Simon was citing adultery, financial misconduct, and something called willful abandonment of parental duties. But how could he know? I'd been so careful. I'd left my phone at home, told him I was going to a spa. There was no way he could have found out about Mick. I ran around to the back of the house, hoping the sliding door might still be unlocked. It wasn't. But I could see through the kitchen window that my phone was still on the counter where I'd left it, powered down and innocent. That's when I noticed the boxes in the garage. Through the small window, I could see my clothes, my books, my personal items all neatly packed and labeled, like evidence at a crime scene. I sat down on the back steps and called the number listed on the legal papers from my fitness watch, which apparently had some emergency calling feature I'd never used before. "Law offices of Patterson and Associates," a voice answered, even though it was nearly 9 at night. "This is Zadie Corvin. I need to speak to someone about these papers I was just served." "Mrs. Corvin, I'm David Patterson. Your husband retained our services earlier today. I'm afraid I can't discuss the details of his case with you, but I can tell you that you'll need your own representation. This is insane, I said. I went to a spa for 1 day. 1 day, and now I'm locked out of my own house. Mrs. Corvin, I'd strongly advise you to contact an attorney. The temporary restraining order was granted based on significant evidence of marital misconduct. Until the hearing next week, you're not permitted on the property or to contact your husband or daughter directly. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, trying to make sense of what had happened. How had Simon found out? And how had he moved so fast? The papers were dated today, which meant he'd filed this morning while I was getting ready for my spa day. My spa day, that wasn't a spa day. My phone was inside the house, so I couldn't call anyone. My purse was locked inside my car, which was now parked in a driveway I wasn't allowed to approach. I started walking toward the main road, hoping to find someone who would let me use their phone. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd left my phone at home to avoid drama, and now I was stranded without it in the biggest drama of my life. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down was walking her dog. She'd always been friendly, though she and Simon talked more than she and I ever did. "Zadie, what are you doing out here so late?" "I'm locked out," I said, which was technically true. "Could I possibly use your phone to call a locksmith?" She looked at me strangely. "Of course, dear, come on in." But when I called the locksmith, he told me he couldn't help me change locks on a property where I wasn't listed as the sole owner, especially not with a restraining order in effect. "How do you know about the restraining order?" I asked. "Ma'am, it's in the system. Filed this afternoon with a notation about potential domestic issues. I can't touch that property without a court order." Mrs. Henderson was listening to every word. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know. I thanked her and started walking toward the main road again. I needed a lawyer, I needed my phone, and I needed to figure out how Simon had discovered my secret. But first, I needed somewhere to sleep tonight. I ended up at a budget motel near the highway, paying cash for a room that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. The irony wasn't lost on me. 12 hours ago, I'd been in a luxury hotel suite with Mick, feeling like the most sophisticated woman in the world. Now I was staring at water stains on a popcorn ceiling, trying to understand how my life had imploded so completely. The next morning, I used the motel phone to call in sick to work. Then I called every divorce attorney in the phone book until I found one who could see me that afternoon. Janet Reeves had an office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Not exactly the high-powered legal representation I'd hoped for, but she was available and her rates were reasonable. "Tell me what happened," she said, reviewing the papers Simon had served me with. I explained about the spa day, the locked house, the restraining order that seemed to come out of nowhere. "Mrs. Corvin," Janet said carefully, "were you actually at a spa yesterday?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your husband's filing is very specific. He's citing adultery with substantial evidence. If you were having an affair, I need to know about it so I can advise you properly." I felt my face flush. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant because your husband has photographs." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of photographs?" Janet pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. "Your husband's attorney provided these as a courtesy to expedite settlement discussions." She spread them across her desk, and my world collapsed. There I was, clear as day, holding hands with Mick in the hotel bar. The timestamp showed yesterday's date and time. There was another photo of us kissing in the parking garage, another of Mick sliding the room key across the table. The photos were sharp, professional quality. Simon had been there. He'd followed me, watched me, documented everything. "How?" I whispered. "According to the filing, your husband tracked your fitness watch. It has GPS capability that syncs with family sharing accounts. When you told him you were going to a spa across town, but your location showed downtown at a hotel, He became suspicious. I stared at the photos, feeling sick. In them, I looked exactly like what I was, a cheating wife meeting her lover. There was no other interpretation possible. "There's more," Janet said gently. She pulled out another set of documents. "Your phone was seized as part of the emergency order. A forensic analysis recovered deleted messages going back 6 months." She showed me printouts of text conversations I thought I'd erased. Messages to Mick about meeting times, hotel reservations, intimate conversations about our feelings for each other. But the worst part was seeing my contact entry for Mick. I'd saved his number under Jim Sarah to avoid suspicion. In the cold light of a lawyer's office, it looked pathetic and deceptive. "Your husband also has financial records," Janet continued. "Cash withdrawals that correspond to your meeting dates. Venmo payments to Mr. Halverson disguised as lunch reimbursements. Credit card points that were redeemed for gifts that your husband never received." I remembered the expensive watch I'd bought Mick for his birthday. I'd used our joint credit card points, telling Simon I was saving them for Christmas presents. "How is this possible?" I asked. "Simon's not some tech expert. He cleans up crime scenes." "Mrs. Corvin, crime scene cleaners work closely with forensic investigators. They understand evidence preservation, chain of custody, documentation protocols. Your husband applied those same skills to investigating your marriage." The room was spinning. "What does this mean for me?" "It means you're in a very difficult position. Your husband has documented proof of a 6-month affair with your direct supervisor. The financial records suggest you used marital assets to support the relationship. The deleted messages show premeditation and deception." "But I'm Maya's mother. He can't just take her away from me." Janet's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "The temporary custody order is already in effect. Your husband has documented that you lied about your whereabouts while abandoning your parental responsibilities to engage in an extramarital affair. The court takes that very seriously." I felt like I was drowning. "What can we do?" "Honestly, your best option is probably to negotiate a settlement. Fighting this will be expensive and public, and the evidence against you is overwhelming." "But I love my daughter. This affair, it doesn't change that I'm a good mother." "Mrs. Corvin, you told your 7-year-old daughter you were going to a spa for self-care, then spent the day in a hotel room with your married supervisor. From the court's perspective, that raises serious questions about your judgment and priorities." I wanted to argue, to explain that she didn't understand the complexities of my marriage, the emotional neglect I'd endured, the way Mick made me feel valued and appreciated. But looking at those photographs, seeing the evidence laid out so clinically, I realized how it must look to outsiders. "There's something else," Janet said. "Mr. Halverson's wife has been contacted. She's filing for divorce as well, and she's named you as a co-respondent in an alienation of affection suit." "What does that mean?" "It means she's suing you personally for damages related to the destruction of her marriage. If she can prove you knowingly pursued a relationship with her husband, you could be liable for significant financial damages." I thought about Erin Halverson, Mick's wife. I'd seen her at company parties, a quiet, bookish woman who always seemed overshadowed by Mick's charisma. I'd told myself their marriage was probably as dead as mine, that I wasn't really hurting anyone. Now she was suing me. "I need to call Mick," I said. "He needs to know what's happening." "Mrs. Corvin, I'd strongly advise against any contact with Mr. Halverson. Your husband's attorney is undoubtedly monitoring your communications, and anything you say could be used against you." But I had to try. I needed to hear Mick's voice, to know that we were in this together. I used Janet's phone to call his cell number. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." I tried his work number. "I'm sorry, Mr. Halverson is no longer with the company. Can I transfer you to someone else?" My heart sank. Mick was already distancing himself, protecting his own interests while I faced the consequences alone. "What happens now?" I asked Janet. "Now we prepare for the hearing next week." But Mrs. Corvin, I have to be honest with you. Your husband has built an airtight case. The best we can hope for is to minimize the damage. I left Janet's office feeling like I was walking through a nightmare. In less than 24 hours, I'd lost my home, my daughter, my job prospects, and apparently my lover. All because I'd thought I was smart enough to have a secret. But Simon had been smarter. The next few days were a blur of humiliation and cascading consequences. I was staying at the budget motel, living off vending machine food, and trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of my life. On Wednesday morning, I decided to go to work. Maybe I could talk to HR, explain that my personal life had nothing to do with my professional performance. Maybe I could save my job at least. But when I arrived at the pharmaceutical supply company, security was waiting for me. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around," the guard said. "You're not permitted on the premises." "I work here," I protested. "I'm the supply coordinator for the Northeast region." "Not anymore, ma'am. Your employment was terminated yesterday. You should have received notification." I hadn't received anything because I didn't have access to my email or phone. "On what grounds?" "I can't discuss that with you. You'll need to speak with HR." But HR wouldn't take my call. When I finally reached someone, they read me a brief statement about policy violations and inappropriate workplace relationships, then hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching my former colleagues arrive for work. Some of them looked at me with pity, others with barely concealed gossip hunger. Word had gotten out. That's when I saw Erin Halverson walking toward the building. Mick's wife worked in the accounting department, handling expense reports and financial audits. I'd always avoided her at company functions, but now she was walking straight toward my car. "Zadie Corvin?" I rolled down my window. "Yes?" "I'm Erin Halverson. I think we need to talk." She was smaller than I remembered, with graying brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses, but there was a steel in her voice that I hadn't expected. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "Oh, I think it's a very good idea. You see, I've been married to Michael for 15 years. I know all about his expense accounts, his travel schedules, his credit card statements, and I've been sharing that information with your husband's attorney." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Every hotel charge, every dinner expense, every business trip that wasn't actually business. I have documentation going back 2 years, not just 6 months. Your husband was very thorough in his investigation, but he missed some things. I didn't." She pulled out a manila folder and spread some papers on the roof of my car. "This is a dinner charge for 2 at Chez Laurent, billed to the company as a client meeting. Except there was no client meeting scheduled that day, and the reservation was made under your name." She showed me another document. "This is a weekend conference in Chicago that Michael claimed to attend, except the conference was cancelled, and hotel records show the room was registered to both of you." I stared at the evidence, realizing how deep the deception had gone. Mick had been using company funds to pay for our affair, and now his wife had documented all of it. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I want you to understand that this isn't just about your marriage anymore. Michael stole from the company to fund your relationship. That's embezzlement, and since you benefited from it, you're an accessory." I didn't know he was using company money. Didn't you? You never wondered how he could afford all those expensive hotels and dinners on a supervisor's salary. You never questioned why he always paid for everything. The truth was, I hadn't wanted to know. I'd been so caught up in feeling special and desired that I'd ignored the practical questions. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to understand that there are consequences for what you've done, not just to your marriage, but to mine, to our children, to the company we both worked for. Michael has been terminated and is facing criminal charges. I'm divorcing him and suing you for damages, and your husband has every right to take you for everything you're worth." She gathered up her papers. "I thought you should hear it from me before you read about it in the newspaper." "The newspaper?" "The Business Journal is running a story tomorrow about the embezzlement scandal. Your name will be in it." She walked away, leaving me sitting in the parking lot of my former workplace, surrounded by the wreckage of my choices. That afternoon, I had to face the worst part of all, trying to see Maya. According to the custody order, I was allowed supervised visitation at the County Family Services building. 1 hour, twice a week, with a social worker present. The building was depressing: fluorescent lights, institutional furniture, the smell of desperation and broken families. I waited in a small room with toys that had seen better days and motivational posters that felt like mockery. When Maya arrived with Simon, my heart broke. She looked confused and scared, clinging to her father's hand. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Mummy, why can't I come home with you?" she asked. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Carol, intervened. "Maya, remember what we talked about. Sometimes grown-ups need to work out some problems, and during that time, you'll stay with Daddy." "But I miss Mommy." I wanted to scoop her up and run away, to take her somewhere we could be a family again. But Simon was watching from the doorway, and I could see the security camera in the corner. "I miss you too, baby. So much." We played with puzzles and read books, but Maya kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Why couldn't she come to my new house? Why was Daddy sad all the time? When would things go back to normal? When the hour was over, Maya cried as Simon took her hand to leave. "I want to go with Mommy." "I know, sweetheart, but this is how it has to be right now." Simon looked at me over Maya's head, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like pity in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the same cold determination that had characterized everything he'd done since discovering my affair. "We'll see you Thursday, Maya," I called out as they left, but I wondered if that was true. The hearing was next week, and based on everything Janet had told me, I might lose even these supervised visits. That night, alone in my motel room, I finally broke down and cried. Not for my marriage, which had been dying long before I met Mick. Not even for my job or my reputation, but for Maya, who was paying the price for my choices. I thought about calling my mother, Rosa, but I couldn't face her disappointment. I thought about calling my sister, but she'd always been closer to Simon anyway. Instead, I sat on the scratchy motel bedspread and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The answer was simple. Simon had outplayed me completely. While I thought I was being clever with my digital detox and my secret meetings, he'd been building a case against me with the methodical precision of someone who understood evidence. He'd turned my own family against me, destroyed my career, and taken away the most important thing in my life, my daughter. And the worst part was, I was starting to realize he was right to do it. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday, but my world continued to collapse before I even got to court. On Friday, the Business Journal article came out. "Local pharmaceutical company rocked by embezzlement scandal" was the headline, and my name was prominently featured as both a company employee and the alleged romantic partner of the supervisor who had stolen company funds. By Saturday, the story had been picked up by the local news. By Sunday, it was trending on social media with hashtags like "NOR Digital Detox Fail" and "RR Crime Scene Revenge." I tried to stay hidden in my motel room, but I needed groceries and basic supplies. Every trip out felt like running a gauntlet of stares and whispers. At the grocery store, I ran into Zadie Corvin, Simon's aunt. She'd always been polite to me, but never particularly warm. Now she looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. "Zadie." "Lydia, how are you?" "How do you think I am? My nephew is raising his daughter alone while his wife's affair is splashed across the internet." "It's not that simple. Isn't it? You lied to your husband, cheated with your boss, stole company money, and abandoned your daughter to play house with a married man. Seems pretty simple to me." Other shoppers were starting to stare. I could see phones coming out, people taking pictures. "I never stole anything," I said quietly. You benefited from stolen money. Same thing. Lydia stepped closer, lowering her voice. That little girl asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why Mommy isn't coming home. Simon has to explain to a 7-year-old that her mother chose another man over her family. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Zadie? Because from where I'm standing, you threw away a good man and a beautiful daughter for some excitement with your boss. I wanted to explain about the emotional distance in my marriage, about feeling unappreciated and taken for granted. But looking at Lydia's disgusted expression, I realized how selfish it would sound. Simon wasn't perfect either, I said weakly. No, he wasn't. But he didn't cheat, he didn't lie, he didn't put his own desires ahead of his daughter's well-being. Lydia shook her head. I hope it was worth it. She walked away, leaving me standing in the cereal aisle, surrounded by curious stares and the wreckage of my reputation. That evening, I made a decision that would prove to be my final mistake. I called Simon. I'd been drinking, not heavily, but enough to make me feel brave and righteous. I used the motel phone to call our home number, the number I'd dialed thousands of times over 8 years of marriage. Simon answered on the second ring. Hello? It's me. A pause. You're not supposed to contact me directly. I just want to talk, about Maya, about what happens next. Zadie, I can't discuss this with you. You need to go through your attorney. She's my daughter too, Simon. I have rights. You had rights. You gave them up when you decided your affair was more important than your family. The calm certainty in his voice infuriated me. You're not perfect either. You think you're so much better than me, but you were emotionally absent for years. Years, Simon. When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you showed any passion or interest in me as a woman? So you decided to find that elsewhere. Yes, I did, and I'm not sorry about it. Mick made me feel alive again, made me feel valued and desired, something you never did. Where is Mick now, Zadie? The question hit like a slap. What? Your passionate, attentive lover who made you feel so valued. Where is he now? Is he supporting you through this? Is he helping you fight for your daughter? I couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. Mick had disappeared the moment things got complicated, leaving me to face the consequences alone. I thought so, Simon said quietly. You threw away your family for a man who abandoned you the second it became inconvenient. I hate you, I said, the words coming out in a rush of pain and rage. I hate your coldness, your superiority, your complete lack of passion. You made me feel invisible in my own marriage. And now you're invisible everywhere else, too. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, shaking with anger and humiliation. But I wasn't done. I called back immediately. Don't hang up on me. Zadie, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to tell the judge about your emotional abuse, about how you drove me to seek affection elsewhere. I'm going to make sure Maya knows the truth about what kind of father you really are. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. If you try to keep my daughter from me, I'll burn it all down. I'll make sure everyone knows what a cold, controlling bastard you really are. Is that a threat of violence, Zadie? Something in his tone made me pause. What? You just said you'd burn it all down if I don't give you what you want. Are you threatening to hurt me or Maya? No, I would never hurt Maya. I'm talking about your reputation, your precious image as the perfect father. I'm recording this conversation, Zadie, for Maya's safety. My blood turned to ice. You're what? Every call to this number is automatically recorded and backed up to cloud storage. It's a safety feature I installed after your affair came to light. You can't use that against me. Actually, I can. Threatening communications are admissible in custody proceedings, especially when they suggest instability or potential danger to the child. I realized I'd walked into another trap. Even in my moment of righteous anger, Simon had outmaneuvered me. I wasn't threatening Maya, I said desperately. I would never hurt her. But you did hurt her. You abandoned her to meet your lover, then lied about it. And now you're making threats about burning everything down if you don't get your way. How is that in Maya's best interest? I hung up the phone and immediately called Janet. I think I made a mistake, I told her. After I explained the conversation, Janet was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Corvin, that was incredibly damaging. Threatening language, admissions of the affair, statements that could be interpreted as showing a lack of remorse or understanding of how your actions affected your daughter. But I was just angry. I didn't mean, it doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you said and how it will sound to a judge. Can we fight it? We can try, but honestly, this makes our position almost impossible. Your husband now has documentation of you making threats, showing no remorse for your actions, and prioritizing your own feelings over your daughter's well-being. I felt the last of my hope slipping away. What does this mean? It means we're going to lose, badly. And now we're going to lose in a way that might make future appeals very difficult. Tuesday morning arrived grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. The courthouse was the imposing brick building downtown, not far from the hotel where this whole nightmare had started. Janet met me on the steps, looking professionally sympathetic but personally resigned. Remember, let me do the talking. Don't react to anything you hear, no matter how unfair it seems. We walked into the courtroom together, and I saw Simon sitting with his attorney, David Patterson. Simon looked calm and composed, wearing a dark suit that made him look authoritative and responsible. Behind him sat Lydia, my mother Rosa, and several other family members. Even my own mother was sitting on Simon's side of the courtroom. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, named Judge Martinez. She reviewed the case file while we waited, her expression growing more disapproving as she read. This is a petition for divorce on grounds of adultery, with requests for sole custody and significant financial sanctions, she began. Mr. Patterson, present your case. What followed was a methodical destruction of my character and credibility. Simon's attorney presented the photographs from the hotel, the recovered text messages, the financial record showing my use of marital assets to support the affair. Then came the recording of my phone call. Hearing my own voice played back in that courtroom was devastating. I sounded angry, vindictive, and completely unrepentant. When I said, "I hate you," and threatened to burn it all down, I could see the judge's expression harden. Your Honor, Patterson continued, Mrs. Corvin has shown no remorse for her actions, no understanding of how they've affected her daughter, and a willingness to make threats when she doesn't get her way. Mr. Corvin is seeking sole custody to protect his daughter from further emotional harm. When it was our turn, Janet did her best, but we had no real defense. She tried to argue that I was a loving mother who had made mistakes, that the affair didn't affect my parenting abilities, that I deserved a chance to rebuild my relationship with Maya. But then the judge asked me directly, Mrs. Corvin, do you understand how your actions have affected your daughter? I tried to give a thoughtful answer about how adult relationships are complicated, how I never meant to hurt Maya, how I hoped we could all move forward together. But Judge Martinez cut me off. Mrs. Corvin, you lied to your 7-year-old daughter about where you were going, then spent the day in a hotel room with your supervisor while she was at school wondering where her mother was. You used family resources to fund an affair, then threatened to burn it all down when faced with consequences. Do you take responsibility for these actions? The courtroom was silent. Everyone was waiting for my answer. I take responsibility for the affair, I said carefully. But my marriage had problems that contributed to... That's not what I asked. Do you take full responsibility for lying to your daughter, for using marital assets inappropriately, and for making threatening statements to your husband? I wanted to explain the context, the emotional neglect, the way Simon had driven me to seek connection elsewhere. But looking at Judge Martinez's stern expression, I realized that none of that mattered anymore. Yes, I whispered. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes, Your Honor, I take responsibility. Judge Martinez nodded and made notes on her papers. Then she delivered her verdict. Divorce granted on grounds of adultery. Sole physical and legal custody awarded to Mr. Corvin. Mrs. Corvin will have supervised visitation twice monthly, pending completion of a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. She continued with the financial arrangements, which were devastating. I would be responsible for 70% of the legal fees, would receive minimal spousal support, and would have to pay child support, despite having no custody. Furthermore, Judge Martinez concluded, Mrs. Corvin is ordered to have no direct contact with Mr. Corvin except through attorneys or the court-appointed visitation supervisor. Any violation of this order will result in termination of visitation rights. The gavel came down with a sound like a coffin closing. 6 months later, I'm living in a small apartment 2 counties away, working at a medical supply warehouse for half the salary I used to make. The pharmaceutical industry is small, and word of the embezzlement scandal followed me everywhere I applied. I see Maya twice a month for 2 hours each visit, always with Carol the social worker watching every interaction. Maya has stopped asking when she can come home with me. She started calling Simon's new girlfriend Aunt Jennifer, and seems happy in ways I remember from before my marriage started falling apart. The psychological evaluation recommended continued supervised visitation and suggested I had narcissistic tendencies and difficulty accepting responsibility for my actions. The parenting classes were humiliating exercises in learning basic concepts about putting children's needs before your own desires. Mick never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to another state and took a job with a different company. His divorce was finalized around the same time as mine, and apparently he's already remarried. Erin Halverson's lawsuit against me is still pending, but my lawyer says I'll probably have to pay damages eventually. The Business Journal story was picked up by several other publications, and my name is now permanently associated with the scandal. When potential employers Google me, the first results are articles about the affair and embezzlement. Dating is impossible for the same reason. But the worst part isn't the financial struggle, or the professional consequences, or even the public humiliation. The worst part is the slow, dawning realization of what I actually lost. I threw away a marriage to a man who, while emotionally reserved, was fundamentally decent and committed to our family. I sacrificed my relationship with my daughter for a few months of excitement with a man who disappeared the moment things got complicated. I destroyed my career and reputation for what I convinced myself was true love, but was really just an escape from responsibilities I didn't want to face. Simon never had to raise his voice, or make threats, or engage in dramatic confrontations. He simply documented the truth and let the legal system respond appropriately. His revenge was perfect because it wasn't really revenge at all. It was just consequences. Last week, I drove by our old house. Simon had planted new flowers in the front garden, and there was a swing set in the backyard that hadn't been there before. Through the kitchen window, I could see him helping Maya with homework at the same table where I'd told him I was going to a spa for digital detox. I thought about stopping, about trying to talk to him one more time, but I remembered the restraining order, the supervised visitations, the recording system he'd installed. Simon had moved on with his life, and Maya was thriving without me. I drove away and didn't look back. The truth is, I got exactly what I deserved. I chose passion over stability, excitement over responsibility, my own desires over my daughter's well-being. I convinced myself that I was entitled to happiness regardless of the cost to others, and I paid that cost in full. Simon's revenge wasn't cruel or vindictive. It was simply the natural consequence of my choices, documented with forensic precision and presented without emotion or bias. He didn't destroy my life. I did that myself. He just made sure everyone could see it clearly. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually gone to a spa that day, if I'd really taken a digital detox to think about my marriage and my priorities. Maybe Simon and I could have worked through our problems. Maybe I could have found ways to feel valued and appreciated without betraying my family. But I'll never know because I chose the hotel room instead. Now I live with the consequences every day, in my empty apartment, at my menial job, during those brief, supervised visits with the daughter I lost through my own selfishness. Simon kept the note he'd taped to our door that night. Keys and phone through council. You're served. I heard from Maya that he has it framed in his home office now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what happens when someone chooses deception over honesty, passion over commitment, personal gratification over family responsibility. It's a fitting monument to the marriage I destroyed and the life I threw away for a few months of feeling special. The digital detox that was supposed to give me freedom ended up costing me everything that actually mattered, and Simon's silent, methodical response taught me a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. The truth always comes out, and consequences are always waiting. Standing on those courthouse steps 6 months ago, holding my divorce papers while photographers captured my humiliation, I finally understood that I hadn't been the victim of Simon's revenge. I had been the architect of my own destruction,